Have you ever saved someone's life? How did it happen? Was in the middle of a neighborhood pool and watched a toddler at the side of the pool, 10 feet in, take his floats off and then jump in the water. He curled up like a ball and began to sink quickly. I was able to reach him before he reached the bottom. He was scared but screaming. The babysitter was on her phone.
I donated bone marrow to a stranger given 2 months to live.
Surprisingly easy process and haven't regretted doing it for a second. Registered during an on-campus drive and was called within the year as a match. The whole process took a couple months, and a couple hours of my time for blood tests and doctor's appointments.
I highly recommend anyone interested to join a registry.
The odds are low of getting selected, but the chance to save a life is worth it. I joined with Be the Match. We get a call for an attempted suicide. Dude slit his wrist bad. When we got to him he was ghost white. Like a sheet of paper white. Put pressure on the wound. Kept him conscious until medics arrived. He survived. Thanked us once he recovered. Scuba. The zip tie that holds the mouthpiece onto the regulator broke, and when the diver exhaled, the regulator popped out of the rubber mouthpiece and fell off to the side. The diver didn't notice until they exhaled all their air and then tried to inhale. They freaked and tried to bolt for the surface from about 120. I grabbed them with one hand and tried to shove my spare regulator into their mouth, but they wouldn't spit out the useless rubber mouthpiece. A fellow dive instructor grabbed me and anchored himself to the mooring line so we stopped descending. I free-flowed my spare regulator into the diver's rubber mouthpiece, and that got him to snap out of it and register what I was trying to do. He spit his mouthpiece out, stuffed my regulator into his mouth, took a big breath, and tried to bolt for the surface again. I stayed clamped to him and my partner stayed clamped to me and the mooring line. Eventually the guy calmed down and got himself back under control, after which we made a controlled ascent. I heard a faint domestic fire alarm one night that wouldn't quit, so I walked down the street to identify where the alarm was coming from. I knocked on the door but there no answer. I couldn't smell smoke or feel heat off the door, but decided to call the fire brigade just in case. They arrived pretty quickly and I pointed out which unit the alarm was coming from. They walked up to the door, then ran back to the truck to grab a door-banging opening thingo and the hose reels. Next thing, all this smoke is pouring out the front door and they're carrying an old lady down the stairs. Then another fiery emerged carrying the lady's cat. Turns out she had turned on the stove to cook dinner but fell asleep. The unit was filled with smoke and she would have asphyxiated, but both she and the kitty survived. She wrote me a lovely note thanking me, which was noise. Moral of the story is to pay attention to noises, things that are out of place. It's better to be safe than sorry, and look after each other. Single-handedly? Twice. Once on baby with RSV. The pulse ox kept going off. My coworker just went in and shut it off. It went off again. I actually looked at baby in mom's arms and he had that whole I'm not breathing look. Snatched him out of mom's arms and started mouth to mouth on the crib until the code team could get there. No ambu bag because out hospital had decided it was too expensive to put one of each size at the bedside. My gift RSV a week later. Second time was a guy who OD'd in the bathroom at Walmart. I just kept his airway open and best on his chest when he would quit breathing. Quite a few others as part of a team. Especially. I told my father he has to go see a doctor or I would force him. He was super tired all the time. Turns out he had cancer and his liver was about to fail. Friend overdosed on heroin. I administered CPR before the paramedics arrived. They did not have to administer Narcan when they arrived as she was breathing when they arrived. My dad and I were on vacation in Paris a couple years ago, walking by the river. There weren't that many people around, jet lag, we were up early, and this girl jogged by us with her dog off leash. A couple of ducks saw the dog coming about 30 feet ahead of us and went into the water. Dog goes in after ducks. Girl goes in after dog. Because it was the Seine in the middle of Paris and the banks are all paved and, apparently, steep, neither of them could get up on their own right. We pulled them both out, one after the other, and then this husky the size of a dire wolf had the nerve to shake off all over us. Probably they would have figured it out if we hadn't been there, or someone else would have heard the yelling in time to help them. Still, it's a fun story. Leash your dogs, kids. Was eating dinner with my kid. I think she was maybe 4 at the time. She started choking. I quickly shot my hand into her abdomen up and in mimicking a Heimlich. Whatever it was she was eating came flying out of her mouth. Once she was good, the stress got me, and I went and cried in the bathroom for a couple minutes. I rescued my uncle from a riptide when I was about 12. He was a big guy and I was obviously much smaller, but I was a strong swimmer and more importantly knew that you swim parallel to the beach, out of the riptide, and then back in. He kept trying to swim directly back to shore and eventually became exhausted and yelled for help. I was lucky that he didn't force me down when I reached him, which is a very common and non-intentional aspect of rescuing people from drowning. They almost don't know they are doing it. But he mustered enough strength to basically let me tow his floating body without thrashing or latching on. I swam laterally and then back into shore. I am a doctor. Even then I can count the number of times I can say I've saved someone's life on one hand with fingers left over. I was working at an athletics event. After a long-distance running event that was open entry, a person collapsed and stopped breathing. I worked with my team to stabilize them and transfer them to hospital. They needed support for their airway to keep breathing. Had they not had it, they would have asphyxiated and died. I met them with their spouse and 8-year-old child a few months later, actually on this day a few years ago. That was the biggest reward for me. The best feeling. I don't know if this really fits. I needed a kidney. My cousin volunteered. During their testing of her, they found a small mass they thought was just fat. It turned out to be cancer. Most kidney cancer apparently is not caught until it's too late because your other kidney takes on the work and you don't get symptoms. She was able to get it all removed and is now cancer-free, didn't even need chemo, just surgery. Anyway, she claims I saved her life. I claim she saved her own by being willing to donate. Kid was drowning. Lifeguard yelled at me. I jumped in the pool and grabbed him. I was the closest adult. Happened in 7 seconds. I got free pool passes. I was in a Discord for people suffering from PTSD. I've saved a couple people from suicide by listening to them and telling them to sleep on it, because death is a big decision. Sleeping also helps reset your emotional regulators and they felt much better once they woke up. I've saved myself with this trick a few times, too slightly smiling face. Wasn't much, really. I work at a convenience store truck stop. A trucker came in one night complaining of chest pains, left arm aching, shortness of breath. Asked if I could call 911. I did and the dispatcher talked me through how to keep this man from having a heart attack. I followed the directions to the letter and minutes later, EMTs arrived to provide assistance. The guy came back 3 days later and thanked us profusely because of my and my coworkers' fast action. We literally saved his life. A fun side note about this story, our company has like, an employee spotlight type thing, where customers can either write to the company, or store management can forward things onto upper management. Some stories get featured at the year-end meetings. I asked my store leader if this would get forwarded on. Not wanting to toot my own horn, but thinking that the other coworker and I deserved some sort of recognition for our actions. His reply, yeah, they'd hear about it. If I send it to them. And that was it. Dude really cheesed me off. So glad I'll be leaving soon. One day in college, I was on my way to grab dinner with some friends and ran into another friend in the parking lot. I invited him to come with me and join us, and we proceeded to have a totally unremarkable dinner in the CAF. Years later, post-graduation, we were hanging out one night getting a bit drunk and stoned, and he confessed to me that he was on his way to kill himself that night when I ran into him. One day at Central Station in Sydney, I noticed a drunk old bloke near the edge of the platform. When I saw a train coming, my gut told me he was going to fall on the tracks, so I walked up near him just in case. Sure enough, he stumbled a few steps and was about to fall on the tracks when I grabbed his shirt and pulled him back when the train was about 20 meters away. Then I took a bite of my Mars bar, trying to be all nonchalant, but my heart was beating 1,000 miles an hour. An old lady walked up to me and said, "I think you saved that poor man's life." I shrugged and gave a self-effacing smile, but the voice inside my head was saying, "Duck, yeah, I saved his life. Make me a cape, old lady, while I put my underpants over my pants, because that's the most superhero shit you're gonna see all day." When I was in middle school, my dad took me to one of his friend's barbecues. His friend had a young son that I think was 4 or 5 at the time. Everyone had been swimming in the pool and went in the yard to go eat. No one saw the little kid run back to the pool except for me. Before I could say anything, he jumped in without his swimmies. I ran as fast as I could to him as he thrashed in the water, and I pulled him out. His parents were absolutely shocked and terrified. They didn't think he would do anything like that. Thankfully he ended up being fine, and it scared him out of doing it again. Always watch your kids if you have a pool. Even if you think they know better, they probably don't. Had an employee come into my office complaining of pain. Started inquiring about the specifics and took a bit for him to start saying his arm was hurting and tingling. Said his chest didn't feel right. Load him up in my car and we go to a clinic as he thought he pulled a muscle working. Clinic doc said he had indigestion and to go home. When we got back into the car I looked at him and made the decision to go to the ER just in case. He was triaged and in surgery 30 minutes later and had a stent installed. Don't remember the exact percentage of blockage but it was pretty bad. If he had gone home probably wouldn't have survived. I worked in a med lab. My job was to go over the doctor's orders and make sure everything was correct. They missed a potassium test so I ran and got that ordered. Turned out to be lethally high. Tech called the doctor at 2 in the morning. Doc got the patient to the hospital. When I was probably about 12 or 13 I saved my 4-year-old brother's life. We were in Oregon for spring break as a family and were watching the ocean waves on the beach. Suddenly an enormous rogue wave came out of nowhere and it pushed us all the way up the beach and against the cliffs. As the water rushed out I saw my brother tumbling in the surge so I lunged and grabbed him with one arm and held on for dear life to a big rock with the other. My shoes, jacket and wallet along with other family members' belongings were all swept out to sea, but I still have a brother. Not me, but my son. He got his lifeguard certification and started work at our local pool. On his very first shift he pulled a drowning kid out. I almost burst with pride. At 16 he accomplished something more important than anything I've done in my 50+ years. That was 3 years ago. He's done it twice more since then. Former lifeguard. You dumb kids drown, I save you. My favorite is the one girl who had a conversation with me that she didn't know how to swim but wanted to jump off the diving board anyway. I said no, get off the diving board. She jumped, I saved her life. You're welcome, dumb girl, wherever you are. Yes. Well, not single-handedly. But with the help of my mother and my older brother. We found him hanging from the rafters, cut him down, performed chest compressions for 30 minutes, until the paramedics arrived. Wait. Before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe, you sexy human.